Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into one of the absolute greatest character studies in cinematic history. In this analysis, we are going to trace the incredibly dark, but let's be honest, entirely fascinating evolution of the Corleone family. We're going to look really closely at how power transitions from one generation to the next. We're talking about a massive shift from a father who is driven by a very strict, albeit definitely twisted moral code, to a son who completely redefines what it means to be ruthless. We're going to unpack their shifting management styles, the deep psychology driving these characters, and the brilliant visual metaphors that make this story so legendary. Okay, let's dive into this. The opening sequence of this story is just a masterclass in contrast. Just picture it for a second. We start in this dark, shadow-filled room. You've got an old man calmly petting a cat, acting as a judge, while desperate people literally come to kiss his hand, begging for the kind of justice that the official government simply couldn't provide. But then, at the exact same moment, right outside those closed blinds, there is bright sunshine, lively music, laughing, dancing. It's a perfectly normal, joyous family wedding. This striking contrast immediately shows us how an utterly ruthless criminal underworld operates seamlessly, right alongside a traditional family celebration. It humanizes the syndicate, right? Framing them not just as monsters, but as a family. To really grasp what's happening here, we have to understand how the whole organization functions under Vito Corleone. You see, this isn't just a street gang, it is practically a state within a state. Take the Undertaker who comes to Vito in that opening scene. The guy believed in America, but the legal system completely failed to punish the men who brutally assaulted his daughter. So what does he do? He turns to the dark underworld. And here's the truly fascinating part. Vito doesn't just want his cash. The ultimate currency in Vito's empire is loyalty, its respect, and the formal recognition of the Godfather's supreme authority. He builds these favors to expand the family's influence right behind the government's back. Which brings us to Vito's very unique approach to management. Look, he is a man who commits terrible crimes, no doubt about it, but he justifies every single one of them through a very specific, deeply emotional, ethical code. Every violent decision he makes is rooted in protecting his family or bringing justice to those who pledge their loyalty to him, just like that broken Undertaker we talked about. In his own mind, he considers himself a man of principle, who just happens to operate outside the law. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how Vito managed his massive empire. Because he didn't do everything himself. He utilized two very different lieutenants to keep everything perfectly balanced. On one side, you have Tom Hagen. He's the adopted son and the ultimate legal shield. Tom is the calm, suited negotiator who uses the law, paperwork, and political connections to cover the family's tracks. And then on the other side, you have Sonny Corleone, pure brute force. Sonny is impulsive, he's aggressive, and he relies entirely on intimidation. Vito absolutely needed both of them, Tom to smoothly navigate the legitimate world, and Sonny to strike absolute fear into the hearts of their enemies. But here's the catch. Vito's principled management style eventually hits a massive roadblock: the drug trade. The other families see narcotics as the incredibly lucrative future of their business, but Vito stubbornly refuses to enter the market. Why? Well, according to his code, it's a dirty, cursed business. The church vehemently opposes it, and more importantly, he knows for a fact that dealing in drugs will completely destroy the political immunity and judicial ties he has spent his entire lifetime building. He genuinely believes that while things like gambling and extortion are, somewhat acceptable vices, drugs would destroy their communities and alienate all the politicians he has in his pocket. And it's this specific business disagreement that ultimately becomes the explosive catalyst for the entire tragedy. That strict refusal, however, comes with a heavy price. It makes Vito a target. The rival families, specifically the Tartaglias, working with a guy named Sollozzo, orchestrate a brutal assassination attempt against him. And during this pivotal moment, the story uses this incredible visual metaphor: falling oranges. Fun fact about this, actually. Originally, the set designers just used the oranges to add a little pop of bright color to the dark sets, but it accidentally became one of cinema's most famous omens of death. As Vito is gunned down in the street, these oranges spill and roll across the ground. It's a striking omen of betrayal that signals the violent collapse of Vito's carefully balanced era, thrusting the family into a state of severe vulnerability. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it introduces Michael Corleone. Because while all those dark office politics are raging on, Michael is completely separated from the criminal syndicate. During that sunny wedding at the beginning, he is a clean, decorated war hero. In fact, he purposefully wears his military uniform to the wedding just to visibly, publicly distance himself from the Mafia's operations. He sits there with his girlfriend, explains the brutal nature of his father's business, but firmly assures her, "That's my family, not me." He views the Mafia as this dirty world that he wants absolutely zero part of. Let's move to and see how this builds over time, because following the shooting of his father, we watch Michael experience a radical and frankly terrifying dark descent. He goes from being that clean, innocent outsider to realizing he is literally the only one who can step up. It all starts with a super tense night at the hospital where he has to protect his vulnerable father from a second assassination attempt. This massive awakening leads him directly to the restaurant assassination, and ultimately, years later, culminates in him becoming the absolute ruthless crime boss. During the bloody baptism. The true catalyst for this transformation happens when Michael's family is desperately debating how to survive the impending mob war. His older brothers, especially the hot-headed Sonny, they just mock Michael. They view him as this soft civilian with clean hands who simply doesn't understand how their world works. But then, out of nowhere, Michael steps up. He coldly proposes a violently pragmatic plan. He will personally murder the rival drug lord Salonzo and a corrupt police captain. It completely shocks the room. The clean-cut war hero is suddenly offering the deadliest possible solution to save his family. The actual execution of this plan is a visceral turning point. Michael meets his targets at a local Italian restaurant. He excuses himself to the restroom, retrieves a hidden gun planted right behind the toilet, and walks back to the table. And in a moment of pure explosion, he shoots both Salonzo and the corrupt police officer dead. That gunshot doesn't just kill his enemies, it completely murders the innocents inside of Michael. By pulling that trigger, he straps a proverbial explosive belt to his old life, permanently and violently severing any ties to his clean past. As Michael officially takes the reins of the family, we see a truly terrifying contrast in management styles. Vito's approach? It was often emotional, loud, and rooted in a specific sense of principled vengeance. He threatened people, sure, but he usually did so with a heavy heart or specifically to protect his loved ones. Michael, on the other hand, he is a completely different breed. His approach is quiet, absolute, and utterly emotionless. He doesn't negotiate, he doesn't yell or show his anger. He simply exterminates anyone who stands in his way, in total silence. He becomes far worse and honestly far more terrifying than his father ever was. Do you renounce Satan? This cold-blooded nature reaches its absolute peak during the climax of the story. Michael is standing in a beautiful church, acting as a godfather to his sister's newborn child. The priest looks right at him and asks this chilling question. Do you renounce Satan and all his works? And Michael, with a perfectly calm, unreadable face, answers, I do renounce them. It is a moment of profound, breathtakingly dark hypocrisy. Because at the exact moment he is reciting these holy vows, the narrative uses masterful parallel editing to show us what is really happening out on the streets. While Michael swears his spiritual godfathership in this quiet, peaceful church, his loyal men are spread out across the entire city carrying out simultaneous, brutal assassinations. He is bathing the streets in blood, systematically wiping out the heads of the 5 rival families. It is such a striking juxtaposition of religion and immense bloodshed. It cements Michael's absolute power and proves that his soul has turned completely to stone. And Michael's vengeance isn't just reserved for rival families either. It extends right into his own home. He discovers that his brother-in-law, Carlo, was actually the traitor who set up the assassination of his brother, Sonny. So Michael confronts Carlo, but instead of raging or screaming, he calmly assures him that he won't be killed. He even promises him a plane ticket out of town. He grants Carlo this completely false sense of security. But the very moment Carlo gets into the passenger seat of the car to leave, Michael has him quietly strangled from the back seat. It's a cold, calculated elimination that proves Michael spares absolutely no one, not even family. Which brings us to the haunting final scene. Michael is standing in his father's old office, a room that has been kept completely in the dark, symbolizing the grim, shadowy nature of the business. His wife, Kay, looks at him from the brightly lit hallway, and then the door is slowly closed on her, shutting her out entirely. This isn't just a door closing. It symbolizes Michael's total isolation. He has locked himself inside a prison of his own making. The man who once proudly said, "That's my family, not me," hasn't just joined the family. He has become the very monster at the center of it. So the crucial question we are left with today is this. How do you make an audience empathize with a monster? The true psychological brilliance of this narrative is that it doesn't present these mobsters merely as unfeeling beasts. It tricks us into understanding them by framing their absolute darkness as a necessary sacrifice for the family. We watch a man completely destroy his own soul, justifying every single horrifying step along the way, and we understand exactly why he did it. It really leaves us questioning our own moral boundaries, doesn't it? Well, thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found this analysis as fascinating as I did. Keep questioning the stories you love, and I'll see you next time.